Okay, so welcome everybody to one of the final 4 or so chapters of VCN's Common Agenda. Today we'll be talking about clean energy development. As a reminder, these events have been put on by VCN and our partners to help educate y'all and environmental advocates on our VCN briefing book, which contains 40 issue papers crafted by over 150 plus network partners. We've been hosting these weekly, starting all the way in September. That's correct. Starting all the way in September, and we'll be ending in November, specifically actually November 4th. These events have been recorded and we're compiling them in a YouTube playlist that we'll be posting for all y'all to see. But without further ado, I'd like to pass it along to Narissa at VCN, who will get this event kicked off.
Thanks, Kyle. Hello, all, and good afternoon. For those of you who don't know, I am Narissa Turner. I work on primarily clean energy and climate issues here with VCN, and I am so happy to be joined today by some of our wonderful partners who have been champions and advocates for clean energy policy in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Today, our authors will be Emily Piontek with Appalachian Voices, Eileen Wool with Sierra Club, Kate Wofford, Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley, Lena Lewis with the Nature Conservancy, and last but not least, Robert Kell, also with Appalachian Voices. And along with these authors, we also are joined today by the wonderful Senator Jennifer Boysko, who will be our guest speaker. And without further ado, I will pass it to Senator Boysko. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm doing this from my car. I am running between events and didn't get home quickly enough because it ran over a little bit. So please excuse my background, but I am parked safely and not moving the car. I'm Jennifer Boysko. I represent the 33rd Senate District, which is Leesburg, Dulles Airport, town of Herndon down to Chantilly, the northwestern part of Fairfax County, the eastern and southern part of Loudoun County. And I have been really very grateful to be able to work with the environmental community over the past several years. We've been able to pass some major legislation that is really transformative, pushing up the goals and the timeline to end our fossil fuel production in Virginia, as well as implementing a timeline and an effort to electrify our transportation system, to make Virginia a more sustainable place. We approved RGGI, which was a huge victory as well. And of course, the Clean Economy Act was a real highlight for all of us. So I have enjoyed working with the environmental community to get input. It has certainly been a learning process for me. I don't have an energy background, although I do have a local government background where I worked with our utilities. It's been really helpful to get the expertise from the environmental community to help educate me, to make sure that I understood the differences in the policies as we are making those decisions. And you all have been, really an enormous asset to all of us. What I'm looking for as we go in the future is expanding the work that we have done. I've been working at the federal level as well to encourage our legislators in Congress to push for more clean economy, to get funding for many of the things that we've been fighting for at the state level. Just last week, I sat down with Abigail Spanberger and a number of other state legislators to go over and talk about not only environmental policy and energy policy, but the equity piece as well. And so I am looking forward to continuing the work with you all, to answering questions that you all might have if that's what you wanted to do today, and to say thank you for your work. I'm looking forward to hearing from the speakers and continuing to learn myself. and just want to thank you all for having me on and being such great partners and allies.
Thank you so very much, Senator Boysko, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. Thank you for your continued support and work for the environment, and then just generally for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Next, we will have our first speaker, Emily Piontek with Appalachian Voices. I do want to remind everyone that we're going to go through each of our speakers before we then take questions at the end, but that doesn't mean you have to hold on to your questions. You can put them in the chat. Without further, you don't need to hear from me anymore. Emily, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Narissa. I just put a few slides together, so I'm going to share my screen and present these really quickly. All right, can you all see that?
I'll do that.
Yes? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Piontek. I'm the Energy Democracy Field Coordinator with Appalachian Voices, and today I will be presenting on the paper, Bringing More Resilient Energy to Virginia Communities. And so this paper focuses on how we can support the development of distributed generation of smaller scale developments and like residential rooftop or solar and things like that, and rather than just the utility scale solar and wind developments that are promoted in the Virginia Clean Economy Act. The authors of this paper were actually Chelsea Barnes, my colleague from Appalachian Voices, and Will Cleveland from the Southern Environmental Law Center, and then Vincent Bowers from Lynnhaven River Now. So big thanks to them for putting all of this together. I'm happy to be able to present it today. And so what these authors have done in this paper is emphasize the importance, like I said, of small scale clean energy development for a lot of reasons, including the improved grid reliability that these kinds of developments offer to the grid, as well as the reduced pressure on agriculture and forest land, and then their ability to provide more clean energy jobs in the development of these small projects. And so to foster that kind of development, the Virginia Conservation Network has made 7 recommendations to support distributed generation. And so those are kind of centered around these 3 things here at the bottom of the slide: removing barriers to customer-owned clean energy, strengthening our existing renewable portfolio standard, and then promoting solar and storage. And so I'll go through these one by one. There are a couple of things that I've sort of called existing opportunities, and then opportunities for the future. So I'll start with an existing opportunity to bring shared solar to Southwest Virginia. And so in 2020, the General Assembly required Dominion Energy to allow shared solar programs in its service area, but the other 2 investor-owned or private utilities in Virginia were able to get themselves written out of that legislation, and they're not required to do so. And so this means that customers living in the north and eastern part of the state might be able to participate in shared solar, but those in the southwest part of the state cannot. And so this year, Senator Edwards and Senator Hanger are going to be co-sponsoring legislation that would require Appalachian Power and Old Dominion Power to allow shared solar programs for customers in their territories. And then Senator Hanger will also likely be doing something similar to help bring shared solar to other service areas in Virginia that are where electric cooperatives are providing electricity there. So that's a really exciting opportunity. Shared solar is great for people who can't have rooftop solar because their roof is shaded, or maybe they can't afford panels of their own, or maybe they are renters and not owners, and so therefore can't put panels on their property. They can participate in shared solar in an array that's benefiting their community. And so in order to do this, the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia is collecting letters of support, and my colleague Austin Counts, who's a member of the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia, has a petition that he's sending around, and he's put together a shared solar action team so to get sign-ons to that petition to help show legislators how important the shared solar legislation is. So I put his email here down on the bottom of the slide if anyone is interested in reaching out to Austin or learning more about the shared solar legislation. Another opportunity underway is to an attempt to protect solar customers from high minimum bills. So Dominion Energy has proposed that solar customers could be charged up to $75 a month as a minimum bill if they have about a 1,000 kilowatt hour system. And so this is a really punitive measure that would disincentivize small scale and residential solar development. And so this is an ongoing case at the SEC. Environmental groups and solar advocacy organizations are recommending a more reasonable minimum bill rather than the $75 a month. So if you're a solar customer, a residential solar customer, they recommend a charge of just over $7 a month. And so this is just $1 more than what the average customer without solar would pay to connect to the grid. And so that's an ongoing attempt to protect people's the financial incentive to participate in solar. The case will be heard in the middle of November, and then the State Corporation Commission is accepting public comments until October 27th. So that's an ongoing example of an attempt to protect and promote small scale solar energy. Another recommendation was to fund the Clean Energy Advisory Board. And so the Clean Energy Advisory Board can help low income customers access clean energy. And so we are recommending that they allocate $2 million, that the state allocate in the budget $2 million to fund that board, and also to spend $2 million on promoting schools, solar in schools in disadvantaged communities, and then also to spend $1 million funding the Brightfields program, and that would bring solar developments to abandoned mine lands or to brownfields across Virginia. And so those are some existing pieces of legislation and other examples of people trying to help promote solar development. But then we have 4 recommendations, and there's not currently a legislation or an effort around any of these 4 things, but definitely would recommend it. And it's likely that environmental organizations in VCN would support bills brought forward in 2022 to do any of these things. And so one of those recommendations is to increase the renewable portfolio standard set aside for small scale clean energy. So this would require Dominion Energy to set aside not just the 1% that they're required to set aside for small scale development now, but to increase that amount to 10%. And then Appalachian Power is not required to set aside any of their generation for small scale development. And so the recommendation is to create a set aside requirement for Appalachian Power, which again is the another investor owned utility and the second largest investor owned utility in Virginia after Dominion. Another recommendation is to maybe have a bill that would prohibit the punitive charges that Dominion Energy is proposing for its solar customers, and so protect people who have, solar, rooftop solar, or less than 15 kilowatts, a less than 15 kilowatt hour system from paying a standby charge or a demand charge, and then finding ways to support solar and storage development for buildings to serve as resiliency hubs. And this would be particularly helpful in communities that are more vulnerable to extreme weather vulnerable to extreme weather and need to have the resiliency that solar and storage could provide in terms of being able to access electricity. And then finally, legislation to create a 25% investment tax credit for customer-owned clean energy would be another recommendation. And I think I may have gone over time, I'm sorry, but with that, I will end and turn things over to the next speaker.
Thanks, Emily. And that was perfect. You were perfect on time. Next, we have Eileen Wool with the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club, who's going to talk to us about offshore wind.
Thank you. Yes, hi, Eileen Wool. I'm the Offshore Energy Program Director with the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. And our paper is ensuring responsible development of offshore wind. It's a paper that I co-authored with David Carr with the Southern Environmental Law Center. So there is absolutely no denying that offshore wind is here and now. We have commitments to 5.2 gigawatts of offshore wind developed off Virginia's coast, thanks to the VCEA, 2.6 gigawatts of which is the Dominion Coastal Energy Offshore Wind Project, otherwise known as CVOW, which will be online in 2026. And as it stands today, there are 35 gigawatts of offshore wind projects in various stages of development in the United States, 32 gigawatts of that along the Atlantic coast and generating power by 2035. So millions of homes, I think an estimate of between 11 and 15 million homes that are going to be powered with offshore wind. So it's massive. The Biden-Harris administration has set a goal of developing 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. So it's 30 by 30. And then on Tuesday this week, the Department of Interior Secretary Haaland announced that announced a U.S. offshore wind leasing strategy that achieves exactly that goal of the 30 gigawatts by 2030. She outlined plans for 7 potential lease sale areas between now and 2025. There are 2 that are approximate and impactful to us in Virginia. The Carolina Long Bay area has a potential lease sale in mid-2022, and the Central Atlantic area, which it looks to be a lot closer to close, if not in Virginia waters, has a potential lease sale in mid-2023. So indeed, offshore wind is here and now. So our job and what this paper is about is ensuring that offshore wind is done right, meaning that offshore wind is brought online in a way that is fair, equitable, and beneficial to all Virginians. As we know, offshore wind offers Virginia the opportunity to not only confront the climate crisis with a really massive clean energy source, but it also provides great economic development opportunities and creates thousands of family supporting jobs right here in Virginia. I love telling people that there are over 8,000 parts in any one wind turbine, which translates to a lot of manufacturing jobs to produce that supply chain of component parts. There are also jobs building the specialized installation vessels, shoring up our ports to handle these enormous parts, and then the obvious turbine operation and the maintenance, and the list really goes on and on. Full build out of the offshore wind industry in Virginia is estimated to create as many as 14,000 jobs. And these are high paying, local, career length jobs that can employ so many Virginians, including individuals with or without high school diplomas, returning citizens and veterans transitioning transitioning to the civilian workforce. But to attract these employers here and capture the job creating and cost saving benefits of offshore wind, Virginia must ensure it stands up a ready workforce for offshore wind. To do so risks losing the large manufacturers such as Siemens Gamesa, which has been sniffing around the Hampton Roads, kicking the tires. Siemens Gamesa is one of the world's largest offshore wind turbine manufacturers in the world, and like I said, it's kicking the tires of Hampton Roads, trying to decide where in North America it wants to set up shop, and hopefully be setting up shop in Virginia. A workforce development plan must be developed and implemented, and investments made to make sure that job training and educational programs are available for all. All efforts must be made to ensure that these educational and training programs are accessible, affordable, and community-based, and are promoted across the state, especially in historically disadvantaged communities. The Virginia Clean Economy provides general guidance governing Dominion's offshore wind workforce development plans, especially as it applies to employing local workers and individuals from historically disadvantaged communities. This is a plan that Dominion will eventually have to present to and have it be considered by the State Corporation Commission in its application for rate recovery, which they're expected to do later this year, and then have the hopefully the hearing before the State Corporation Commission next year. So policies must be enacted that require Dominion to meet specific and measurable hiring goals that so as to ensure that this ratepayer funded project equitably delivers on the intent behind the VCEA, which I just said provides just the general guidance that Dominion will consider and employ local workers, individuals from historically disadvantaged. It just doesn't say how much. We need to have policies that clarify exactly what Dominion's hiring plans, so that they're not interpreted as being limited to just the 150 jobs that Dominion has stated it will create directly with the construction of CVAL, and be more reflective of VCA's intent and reflective of Dominion's larger role in supporting the majority of the offshore wind jobs that are going to be generated by their project, to include the suppliers and manufacturers, the subcontractor, all associated with their project. And then finally, funds must be provided to support clean energy workforce development programs that are accessible, affordable, and community-based. Funds must also be provided to promote these training opportunities to specific communities as outlined in the VCEA. There was a $15 million budget request that unfortunately did not make it into the governor's budget, but we need to lobby to make sure that that gets in. It does that, just that. It funds workforce development programs and the promotion of those workforce development programs. The Hampton Roads Caucus endorsed this budget request, and we need to lobby to make sure that it gets back in there into the budget. Is very important. Finally, in closing, I'll just say that offshore wind offers Virginia and especially the Hampton Roads area with the opportunity to rebrand ourselves away from being the poster child for flooding and sea level rise and vulnerability to one instead of hope and sustainability. And with offshore wind done right, we can meet that climate crisis with an even bigger solution that confronts income inequality by creating more and higher paying jobs and building wealth for so many Virginians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eileen. Next, we have Kate Wofford with the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley. I mess that up every time. Coming to talk to us about utility scale solar. Kate.
Thank you, Narissa. It's great to be with you all this morning. Forgive me, I have a cold. I had forgotten about colds. It's been like 2 germ-free years, but luckily we're on Zoom, so you're not going to catch my cold, but I might sneeze. As Narissa said, I'm Kate Walker with Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley. We're switching gears now from wind back to the sun. And this is actually great timing for me to be with y'all on this topic this morning. Just last night, our board at Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley had a rare in-person meeting. We met for about 2.5 hours in Luray, and we devoted about 2 hours of that meeting to the topic of utility scale solar. So this morning, I've really been reflecting on what was a thoughtful discussion at our board last night. And before I hit the high points of the white paper, I'll just share a couple of upshots from that conversation last night. The first one is that utility scale solar is a really complicated issue. And the more we talk about it and the more we learn about it as a staff and board, we just keep coming back to the fact that it's incredibly site specific and project specific. The second thing I'll share from our discussion last night is that this is a really consequential issue in the Shenandoah Valley. And I think that's true across the Commonwealth as well. And the third thing is that we can do this in a way that minimizes runoff to streams and rivers, potentially complements agriculture, makes the best use of land, or we can see these projects happen on, our best deep soils, farmland, on healthy forests with bad erosion control. And the only way we're going to get carefully sited, well-built projects that the public can really get behind is if we, Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley, and then everybody on this call, do the advocacy and the education work to make that happen. A lot of that advocacy and education, honestly, is happening and must happen at the local level because these are local land use planning decisions in many ways. But there are also a lot of state policy decisions that have big implications for how utility scale solar rolls out. And that is the segue to a few things that we're here today to push forward, hopefully in the upcoming General Assembly and future years, to make sure that what we end up with is well-sited, well-built utility scale solar projects instead of the opposite of that. So this paper was written by Dan Holmes from the Piedmont Environmental Council and Chelsea Barnes, with a lot of input from place-based groups and others who are working on utility scale solar issues. And the first policy recommendation is to incentivize projects on marginal or disturbed lands. this is an issue where I think it's fair to say we don't have perfect agreement in the conservation community on this. And even in local communities, people are pretty far apart that tend to agree on other things. They're pretty far apart on some of these projects. But what everybody agrees on is that we need to be seeing utility scale solar projects on landfills and on mining lands, brownfields, former industrial and commercial sites. Like that's where we all agree they should go. And why aren't they going there? So there are some policy recommendations to fund the Virginia Brownfield and Coal Mine Renewable Energy Grant Program. That's a mouthful, but without voices and others that passed last year, but as far as I know, it's not funded. And there are other ways to try to incentivize projects on those brownfields. Same goes for distributed, and I won't spend any time on that because Emily did a fantastic job at the top of this call describing some good ways we can get more solar built on rooftops and behind the grid. And like Emily said, that reduces pressure on farmland and forest land. A couple other things we can have laid out in the near term are trying to get a handle on what's getting built. How are the projects that are getting built either complementing other values that we have for agriculture or natural resource protection, or conflicting with those? And when we see how, get a handle on what is getting built, then that will help us improve policies in the future. Another way is to improve best management practices. Most of these projects come through DEQ's permit by rule process. And there is some room for improvement in that permit by rule process. And if there's time in the Q&A, maybe we can get into that a little bit more. But I want to save time for the Q&A, so I'll close with just the last thing that's not in the briefing book paper, but it comes up all the time, which is make sure that these local land use decisions stay at the local level. So there's some policy tweaks that we want to see and need to see, but when it comes to the siting and the local land use planning, keep it at the local level. I'll stop there, Narissa. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That was a wonderful summary of a very complex issue. Next, we have Lena Lewis with the Nature Conservancy to talk to us about energy efficiency. Lena?
Okay. So I co-authored the paper Slashing Pollution and Energy Bills with Virginia's Untapped Resource Energy Efficiency. And my co-authors were Bill Penniman with the Sierra Club and Walton Shepard with the Natural Resource Defense Council. And I want to start by, next slide, please. By talking about how important energy efficiency is in being part of an effective and equitable transition to clean energy. The cleanest, cheapest energy is the energy that's never generated. Energy efficiency is going to help us meet our renewable energy goals. Virginia can meet probably up to 20% of our residential, commercial, and industrial sector energy demands just through energy efficiency. And that's going to make it that much easier to meet the rest of our electricity demand through renewable energy. And energy efficiency improves energy equity. Low-income households pay a higher energy burden. Energy burden is the percent of income devoted to energy bills. And low-income households have a higher energy burden, not just because they have less disposable income, it's also because low-income housing has worse insulation and less efficient appliances. So that exacerbates the energy burden. Some low-income households have stunningly high energy bills. So energy efficiency saves money on electricity bills, and it puts people to work locally in jobs like installing insulation and more efficient HVAC systems. So if efficiency is so wonderful, why aren't we making full use of it? There's several barriers. Upfront costs, especially for people with less disposable income, lack of time, that applies to pretty much everybody, and a lack of knowledge about what's possible. That's why we need government intervention and policy and programs. And there's lots of entry points and ways for government to assist. And I'm going to focus on 4 legislative avenues. Next slide, please. So as you know, Virginia is a Dillon rule state. So we need legislation to empower localities. Some localities want to adopt stretch codes for buildings to have stronger energy efficiency codes than the state building codes. And some localities have set climate action goals, and they would like to incorporate higher standards for their buildings' carbon emissions. Some localities would like to enact benchmarking. This means requiring large building owners to make their buildings' energy intensity public so that tenants will know their monthly energy costs when they're shopping for spaces to rent. That will allow tenants to compare energy use between similar building types and allow tenants to see our buildings improving their efficiency over time. Next slide. Okay, this is the wonkiest policy I'm going to talk about, the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard. The first thing to understand is that electric utilities are in a strong position to provide energy efficiency programs to their customers. Things like whole house energy assessments, energy efficiency retrofits, and rebates for efficient refrigerators. When electric companies provide these services to some customers, it saves money for all ratepayers. It is cheaper to help customers use less electricity than to build new power plants. When the Virginia Clean Economy Act was passed, it included the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard, which requires investor-owned utilities, that's IOUs, to meet a set amount of electricity demand through providing energy efficiency for customers instead of generation. And that required energy efficiency increases every year. It is a binding target. As currently written, the targets increase through 2025, and after 2025, they will be set by the State Corporation Commission. And that leaves a big question about what will happen with this policy after 2025. We've done modeling that shows that these targets are easily achievable through 2025 and should increase for many years to come. And we need legislation to ensure that those targets will increase every year after 2025. Next slide, please. Okay, beneficial electrification means switching from fossil fueled appliances to electric appliances in cases where it saves money on total household energy costs and lowers carbon emissions, and in some cases also improves indoor air quality, which can lead to better health outcomes. Our state code limits, or in some cases is ambiguous about allowing energy efficiency programs to include beneficial electrification, which is sometimes called fuel switching. So we would like to have legislation that would clarify and expand opportunities for beneficial electrification. Next slide, please. And finally, state appliance efficiency standards, the best energy and water saving policy you've never heard of. Appliances have to meet basic federal efficiency standards to make it onto store shelves. In addition, some states have appliance efficiency standards that exceed federal standards for appliances like the ones pictured here. Those states save their residents a surprising amount of money on water and energy bills and reduce their associated pollution. And customers never even notice that they missed the opportunity to buy inefficient appliances. There are many more opportunities to improve efficiency in Virginia, and we need to take advantage of all of them. Every form of energy has environmental and community impacts, as you've been hearing other speakers talk about, and we can be doing much more to help people live comfortably while reducing their energy costs and pollution in Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. I just want to take a moment to remind folks that if you have questions for any of our speakers, please put them in the Q&A. Last but not least, we have Robert Kell with Appalachian Voices to talk to us about an equitable clean energy transition. Robert.
Hey everyone, it's nice to be with you this afternoon. I'm Robert Kell. I'm the New Economy Program Manager with Appalachian Voices, and I'm here to talk with you today about building an equitable, clean energy economy for communities and workers. I didn't write this paper. My colleagues Chelsea, Mary, and Kim did, and their contact information is here, and as is mine. Let me figure out how to work this. Okay. As you may know, the Virginia Clean Economy Act requires investor-owned utilities to retire all carbon-emitting electric generating units located in Virginia, with different closure dates for more than 40 carbon-emitting power plants operating throughout the Commonwealth. There is no plan or impact study to guide the transition of the approximately 14,000 Virginians employed in the fossil fuel extraction industry, and another 10,000 folks who are employed in the fossil fuel electricity generation, transmission, and distribution energy. One such plant is Dominion's VCHEC plant in Wise County, which is home to about 150 jobs and $8.5 million tax revenue for the locality and around a $40 million local economic impact. Like VCHEC, other power plants are disproportionately located in low-income communities and communities of color, and the communities that are losing the economic benefits of fossil fuel production aren't necessarily the communities reaping the benefits of Virginia's clean energy economy. We need to ensure that Virginia's clean energy sector does not outsource jobs to other states or other regions of our state, but that equitable workforce recruitment and training programs are made available within fossil fuel communities and plans that help think about how to replace lost tax revenue. I really like this line from the paper. Justice requires that the legacy impacts of the fossil fuel industry be addressed and that communities be compensated and prioritized in that transition. In other states, they have tiers of priority that really think about formulas where the impact of closing these power plants have the most harmful side effects for communities, and think about the long legacy of injustice caused by both extraction and pollution. Let me stay here for a second. Coal-field communities have been experiencing the harsh reality of the declining coal industry for decades, and now more workers and communities across the entire Commonwealth will begin to experience this challenging economic transition. As we change the way we produce energy, Virginia's state agencies should be responsible for ensuring that vulnerable communities and workers are not left behind during the transition. So building a just transition, we believe that General Assembly should create first an Office of Just Energy Transition under the direction of either the Secretary of Labor or Commerce and Trade, and a new program of just energy transition within the Department of Housing and Community Development. We believe these offices should coordinate across relevant state agencies and to maximize the state services and effectiveness in transitioning from fossil fuels in these communities and for these workers, and should immediately commission a study regarding the effects of power plant and mine closures to inform a statewide just transition action plan. And again, this model is similar to other models, including in Colorado and Illinois. Another policy recommendation that we're making is to repurpose the Coal and Energy Commission to the Energy Transition Commission so that they can study, make recommendations, and develop plans and procedures to ensure, again, that the Commonwealth is assisting these communities and not leaving any of these fossil fuel impacted communities behind as we gear up for that 2050 deadline. And if you're feeling excited and passionate about this, you can take action today. You can go to tinyurl.com/Virginia Just Transition and tell Governor Northam to include this office in his budget and to make it a priority that we don't leave these communities behind. And again, my contact information is there, robert@appvoices.org. I went pretty fast, so hopefully we have some time for questions.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, you guys all did great. We've got plenty of time for questions, so I am very excited. Again, as a reminder, you can put questions in the chat and I will read them out to our panelist. I see there's a question. It looks like, Kate, you started to answer this, but if you'd like, you can answer this one live from Brent. Has the state developed a model ordinance for utility scale solar for localities? That's the question. There's some more context there, but.
Thank you, Brent. I was just about to drop it in the chat and it looks like the link is broken. I will put a link to some resources that we pulled together that have links to a bunch of other local land use planning resources. Honestly, we have found that NC State, North Carolina State, has a solar resource center and it has a ton of great stuff, and that's what we've turned to. So I'll drop those in the chat as well. I'll also mention the Berkeley Group is a consulting firm, and they are working with a lot of localities, at least in our part of the Commonwealth, because you can't really just drop in an ordinance because every county sort of approaches land use planning differently. It's good to see some guidelines and some examples of good ordinances and things that ought to be considered in your ordinance. And then if the county is willing to pay for it, to work with somebody like the Berkeley Group to actually make sure that your comp plan language and then your ordinance is accomplishing what the community wants to accomplish with the land use planning. But I'll drop a couple links in.
Thanks, Kate. Next, we have a question from an anonymous attendee, but I think this one is for you, Eileen, or maybe not. I think this is just broad, so anyone can answer this. How can we advocate as individuals for this budget to support clean energy and provide valuable jobs?
Well, definitely reaching out to the governor's office to get that inclusion of that proposal that was coming from the Hampton Roads community. It's actually calling for the establishment of an offshore wind talent and supply chain fund. So I would, as a first step, is reaching the governor's office and asking them to add that into his budget. Short of being successful on that, I would turn around to the General Assembly members, your General Assembly members, and lobby for inclusion of that offshore wind talent chain fund.
Thanks, Eileen. Next we have, I think we have a question about, I guess, an app voices study that was mentioned. Laura asked, could we drop a link to that in the chat? I'm not sure which presentation it's in reference to, though, unfortunately.
I'll drop a link to the chat for the shared solar petition. That's something I think I've mentioned. Maybe that would be helpful.
I was gonna say maybe that's what they meant. I'm not entirely sure. Thank you, though, Emily. Okay, next question is from Gary Harris. They ask, what role should advanced nuclear, including SMRs, breeder technology, alternative fuel? Oh man, I can't read the second part of that. Fusion play in the clean energy economy, if any. And I will actually open this to the entire panel if anyone has any thoughts they would like to share.
I can just start by saying, generally, in terms of the way that the Clean Economy Act was written, which is not the end all be all on what role anything should play in how we reach a clean energy economy is, but just starting with where we are right now, the Clean Economy Act says we will reach a zero carbon economy by 2045, but that includes nuclear, right? And we have this RPS, this renewable energy portfolio standard that gets to 100%, but that's setting aside nuclear. So there is room in this for all sorts of advanced nuclear options if that's the technology that Virginia wants to adopt. Now, that's different from saying what should we adopt and what do advocates in our community want to advocate for. So I will leave the answer to that question to anybody else on the panel who wants to tackle that.
Any other thoughts our panelists would like to share?
I can't multitask, and so I was trying to drop my things in the chat. What's our question, Narissa?
Yes, so it was a question in regards to other types of fuel sources to meet a clean energy economy, and I think specifically mentioned was advanced nuclear, alternative fuels, or fusion.
I really can't answer a question about fusion, but that's interesting because people have started sending me articles. There was an article in the New Yorker, and there was an opinion piece in the Hill. So fusion has been in my inbox, but can I answer? But the one, even this is like aggressive opinion piece I just read this morning said at the earliest anything happening is many years out. So we've got this transition is happening now. So maybe fusion will be part of it in the future, but that doesn't slow us down.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Lena.
I have my mic off. I just dropped a bunch of stuff in the chat and the URLs weren't working. So it looks really messy and weird, but some of these are a little more not controversial or thought-provoking, but I just thought I would share a few perspectives that are interesting. So there's a few articles linked in there if folks are interested. And like blog posts.
Yeah, I just want to build off of what Kate said and just echo that we are going to need to depend on technologies that either don't exist yet or are still in research stage. And yet we shouldn't depend on them. We shouldn't count on them as we figure out how to decarbonize now. We have to go ahead and decarbonize with what we've got now. Because we don't know for sure that those other technologies, whether it's new kinds of nuclear or carbon capture, are going to work large scale for us or not.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Lena. Next question is from John Reeves. Senator Hanger is our state senator. Which solar initiatives might he help for more solars at schools / municipal facilities?
I can try to answer this one real quickly with the caveat that I'm not entirely familiar with all of the utilities that are in Senator Hanger's district, but my first guess would be that either of the shared solar bills, so the one that he's co-patroning with Senator Edwards to require Appalachian Power and Old Dominion Power to allow shared solar would be one. And then I do believe that he has some cooperatives in his district as well. So his bill that he's likely going to patron by himself to require cooperatives to allow shared solar would be another. And I put a link to more information about the shared solar effort in the chat as well. So John, if you can see that and go to that page, there's a lot more information there. So hopefully that will help answer your question as well.
Thanks, Emily. It looks like we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If anyone would like to pop another question in the chat real quick.
While we're waiting, can I share can I share a detail that I left out in my 6 minutes?
Yes, you may, Kate.
Thank you, Narissa. So as I understand, currently for utility scale solar projects, and this is a water quality issue, and this is an energy call, but our friends in the water calls will be really, I think, interested in this. The DEQ considers solar panels to be pervious as opposed to impervious. And Augusta County in our region has decided that it will choose a different way, and it considers solar panels to be pervious and the land around the solar panels to be impervious when, and this all matters because it goes into the engineering calculations that determine how much stormwater infrastructure, so your stormwater panel, and then during construction, your erosion and sediment control. So Augusta County looked elsewhere. They found Minnesota model where it's a compromise between the panels themselves are considered that water cannot run through them, where the land around them isn't. That's the kind of thing where I think advocates like us on this call can make some tweaks, like look and see what's working and what's not working, bring that back to either the agencies or the General Assembly, depending on where the decision needs to get changed, and make improvements to the process of how these projects are getting built and minimize the negative impact.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kate. We have another question from John Reeves. Some folks say solar panels will be recycle/disposal nightmare. Any recent info? And that is open to anyone.
Just to fill the awkward silence. I think nightmare is an interesting word. I know that there are companies that are working on recycling. Let's say that fails and we're not able to recycle. I think these panels will be able to be disposed of in landfills pretty effectively with, lined landfills containing the chemicals that are in these solar panels pretty effectively. So in that sense, I don't think it will be a nightmare. I think it would be a shame not to be able to recycle their parts, but I think that we have companies that are working on that, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to reuse a lot of those components.
And I'll follow up on that and just hit like a one trick pony. The local land use planning really matters here. We've seen some counties that have really good decommissioning. So they'll issue a special use permit for a project and it has really clear bonding and decommissioning. And so, the county and the local community is going to be protected in 30 years. We've seen other counties that don't do that. And so who's going to be on the hook in 30 years if if the solar developer and the landowner and whoever's running the project are no longer with us or in their current roles in 30 years. So that's one of the important considerations for local government permitting.
Thanks, Lena. Thanks, Kate. All right, I think we have time for one more question and then we're going to wrap. This one is again from Gary Harris. What is the best strategy to fill the gaps and make Hampton Roads the offshore wind supply hub for the East Coast, Maine to North Carolina?
I guess I'll field that question. Filling the gaps in between. I can't put my finger on gaps. I think the state is doing really a magnificent job. We have a lot of stakeholders been working on this for many, many, many years. Actually, one of the near holes that has now been is regional coordination. So Virginia is working with both North Carolina and Maryland on regional initiatives to support economic development, and there is just so much, as I outlined in the beginning of my spiel, is so much offshore wind that we really don't need to worry about the competition between states. There's enough between us all that we'll all get very large, significant chunks of the industry. And it's going to be working with each other as to our strengths. Certainly Hampton Roads has a lot of strengths to it. And we are hoping to capture manufacturing of maybe the turbines of Siemens Gamesa bites, which are very, very large. But there's really enough to go around to all the localities. Certainly Hampton Roads has so many advantages. We are a port that doesn't have any of the physical barriers. Because these are large machine parts that can't go under bridge tunnels and can't go with any kind of overhang. So we have that. We have a deep water port, very direct access to a lot of the projects along the Atlantic. And we also have, one of the world's largest shipbuilding industries. So we are a maritime community. There's no denying that. So we can really speak to that strength. But yeah, I mean, and as long as we're working in cooperation with everyone, I think it's really, I don't see any barriers to Virginia being a hub. I don't see any barriers to there being multiple hubs, but Virginia seizing a good sizable percentage of that and actually realizing all those jobs that come along with that.
Thank you, Eileen. And with that, we are at time for our Q&A section. I want to take another moment to thank all of our panelists today, some of which are authors, all of which are partners and are very much appreciated. Kyle, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, our authors. Thank you, our guest speaker. Thank you, participants, for all coming to this event. We couldn't do this thing without any of you. I'd like to remind everyone that our next event is utility reform, and that will be happening the 22nd. I want to say that is Thursday of next week, but it could be Friday. But the next event is utility reform. It's next week, the 22nd. Be ready for that. But thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I was checking the weather. It seems like it's going to rain tomorrow, but today, not really. So get outside. I'm going to walk my dog. I really did check the weather. So typically Point Willer all the way up to North VA, all the way down, Norfolk, all that, whatever, just for this bit. But anyway, please go have lunch. Get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye. Oh, boy.